My sister is sick. 4 words on notebook paper tucked under the windshield of a Harley outside a truck stop diner. The road captain picks it up, coffee in hand, expecting a prank, but the childish handwriting makes him stop. He shows his brothers. They find the boy, Marcus, shivering at a bus stop. His sister has a rare blood disorder. The single mother can't pay. The captain makes a call. By Saturday morning, 900 motorcycles roar into the hospital parking lot, and a check covers every cent. His sister Maya, 6, has a rare blood disorder, and a treatment that costs more than their mother will earn in a lifetime. The man who found the note is Road Captain Vinny of the Iron Brotherhood, a club with a reputation. But the bikers have a code. The clock is ticking, and what comes next proves that salvation sometimes wears leather. Marcus Chambers is 9 years old. He lives with his mother, Rochelle, and his 6-year-old sister Maya in a 1-bedroom apartment outside Mesa, Arizona. They share a pull-out couch. The kitchen table doubles as a homework desk and a place to stack overdue bills. Rochelle works double shifts at a truck stop diner, bringing home just enough to keep the lights flickering. But none of that hardship prepared them for what happened 6 months ago, when Maya's nose started bleeding during a cartoon and wouldn't stop. 3 days of tests later, the doctors sat Rochelle down and used a phrase that rearranges a mother's entire world: severe aplastic anemia. Her daughter's bone marrow had simply stopped producing blood cells. Without a transplant, the timeline was a death sentence delivered in medical jargon. With a transplant, she had a fighting chance. The cost was the problem. After insurance, the out-of-pocket total came to $180,000. For a single mother who earns minimum wage and pours coffee for tips, that number might as well have been written in a foreign language. Rochelle started selling everything: the television, her grandmother's ring, her own winter coat. She picked up a third job cleaning offices at night. She came home at 2 in the morning, checking on Maya in the dark, and then sat at the kitchen table with a calculator, running the same impossible math over and over. Marcus watched all of it. At 9 years old, he understood that his mother was drowning, and that his sister's life depended on finding money that simply didn't exist. So he did the only thing a child could think to do. He tore a sheet of paper from his school notebook. He wrote 4 words in his best handwriting: "My sister is sick." Then he folded it, tucked it into his jacket pocket, and slipped out before sunrise, walking a mile down the highway to the truck stop where the bikers parked their motorcycles every morning. The chrome-heavy machines were lined up outside the diner like sleeping beasts. He picked the biggest one, a matte black Harley-Davidson with a skull painted on the gas tank, and he wedged the note beneath the windshield wiper. Then he ran to the bus stop across the lot and waited, shivering in the pre-dawn chill. 15 minutes later, Road Captain Vinny Morty walked out of the diner, coffee in hand, and spotted the damp paper fluttering against the glass of his bike. He pulled it loose, expecting a prank, maybe some kid leaving a drawing, but the handwriting hit him in the gut. It wasn't a prank. He showed the note to his 2 brothers, Reaper and Tank. Reaper's face went hard. Tank just pointed toward the bus stop, where a small figure sat curled against the cold. They approached slowly, 3 large men in leather vests and full-sleeve tattoos, and the boy looked up with eyes that had already seen too much. Marcus didn't run. He just said, "Mister, my sister needs help." Within 10 minutes, Vinny heard the entire story: the rare diagnosis, the exhausted mother, the numbers that sounded like a ransom demand. He looked at the note again, then at his brothers. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact labeled Bones National. His thumb hovered for a second. Then he pressed dial. The phone rang twice in the Iron Brotherhood's national office in Phoenix. Bones Robert Santino on his driver's license, but nobody had called him Robert since 1982, answered with a voice like gravel wrapped in sandpaper. "This is Bones. It's 6 in the morning. This better be important." Vinny didn't waste a breath. He read the note aloud. "My sister is sick." For 5 full seconds, the president of the entire club said nothing. Then he cleared his throat and the tone shifted from annoyance to something far sharper. "Where's the family now?" Marcus was still at the bus stop, but Vinny had already sent Reaper to buy him a hot chocolate and a breakfast sandwich from the diner. The boy hadn't eaten since yesterday's free school lunch. Within 20 minutes, Vinny sat beside Marcus in a booth at the truck stop, and the child told his story with the clarity of someone who'd rehearsed it in the dark. His mother, Rochelle, worked 3 jobs: the diner during the day, an office cleaning crew at night, and weekend shifts at a laundromat. Their apartment was one missed paycheck from eviction. Maya had been admitted to Phoenix Children's Hospital 3 weeks ago, and the window for a successful transplant was closing. The hospital's social worker had given Rochelle a list of charitable foundations. None had responded. The insurance company had approved the procedure on paper, but not the facility fees, the anesthesia deposits, the post-operative medications, the hidden costs that stack up like a second mortgage. The number quoted in a letter Rochelle kept folded in her purse like a wanted poster was $180,000 precisely. Vinny looked at Marcus's worn-out sneakers, the jacket 2 sizes too small, the dried tear tracks on his cheeks. Then he stood up and called Bones back. "We're gonna fix this," he told the boy. "You're gonna see your sister get better." Marcus blinked. "You mean it, mister? Kid, brothers don't lie to each other." At 8:15 that same morning, the Iron Brotherhood's emergency beacon went active. That beacon was a group text reserved for moments when a member's life hung in the balance: a missing child, a house fire, a medical crisis. For the first time in the club's 40-year history, it was triggered for a stranger. Every chapter in Arizona got a message. Brother needs help. Child's life in danger. Full story at noon call. Stand by. By 8:30, the text had jumped state lines into Nevada, New Mexico, California. By 9, the phone tree had reached chapters as far east as Texas. A club known for intimidating tattoos and loud pipes was now coordinating a convoy like a military operation. Road captains mapped routes. Tail gunners confirmed pit stops. The club's charity committee, 3 retired bikers who normally ran the annual toy drive, pulled out their budget spreadsheet and started crunching numbers. Meanwhile, Vinny drove Marcus to the hospital. Rochelle was in Maya's room, holding her daughter's hand while the IV dripped and the monitors beeped a rhythm that sounded like borrowed time. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. When the door swung open and her son walked in flanked by a giant in leather with a skull on his gas tank tattoo, she nearly dropped to her knees. "Marcus, what did you do? Who is this?" Vinny removed his bandana, revealing a receding hairline and kind, tired eyes. "Ma'am, my name is Vinny. Your boy left a note on my bike this morning. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to tell you that help is coming." He handed her his phone, open to a group chat where dozens of bikers were posting photos of packed saddlebags, route maps highlighted in yellow, and messages like "rolling out in 10. Tell the little one we're coming. An Arizona chapter 40 bike strong, ETA Saturday dawn." Rochelle's hand went to her mouth, and she made a sound that was halfway between a sob and a laugh. By Friday evening, the first waves of riders began arriving at staging points outside Phoenix. Clubhouses in Flagstaff, Tucson, and Las Vegas filled with bikers sleeping on pool tables and garage floors. One chapter president, a man called Sarge who drove a semi-truck for a living, rerouted an entire load of produce just to make the trip. A welder from Albuquerque named Crazy Horse closed his shop for 3 days and rode through the night with a check for $5,000, every cent his small chapter had collected in 24 hours. At the hospital, the social worker approached Rochelle and told her, hesitantly, that a group of motorcycle enthusiasts had contacted the billing office. She didn't know the details, but she'd never seen a deposit come through that fast. A preliminary wire of $50,000, flagged as good faith. Rochelle sat in a plastic chair next to Maya's bed, clutching her daughter's stuffed bunny, and wept silently into her sleeve. Saturday morning arrived cool and clear. At 8 o'clock, the first engines fired. At 9, the freeway on-ramp near the hospital looked like a river of steel. 900 motorcycles, exactly 900, poured into formation. Harleys, Indians, vintage Triumphs, custom choppers, baggers with flags whipping in the wind. Riders flew colors from every chapter in the Southwest and beyond. A permit had somehow been obtained. Bones called in a favor with a retired narcotics detective who'd once ridden with them before he pinned on the badge. The Phoenix police provided an escort, not for containment but for respect. The parade filled 3 lanes. Drivers on overpasses pulled over and stood on their hoods to film. By 9:30, the hospital parking lot could no longer be seen. It had become a sea of chrome, leather, and a rolling thunder that vibrated through the walls of the pediatric wing. Inside, Maya was awake for the first time in days. Rochelle had propped her up with pillows. Marcus stood by the window, face pressed to the glass. "Maya, come look. They're all here for you." The little girl turned her head. The movement was weak, but her eyes widened as she saw the endless line of headlights stretching into the distance. She didn't understand the number, but she saw the teddy bears tied to handlebars, the signs that read, "Get well, Maya, and we ride for the fight," and the bikers removing their helmets to reveal faces of every age and color. Vinny and Bones, flanked by 4 road captains, walked through the sliding glass doors carrying a simple black leather satchel. Inside was a cashier's check made out to Phoenix Children's Hospital. The amount, $180,000, every penny. Bones presented it to Rochelle in the hallway outside Maya's room. He knelt down, this massive man with a gray beard and a crow tattoo crawling up his neck, and spoke directly to Marcus. "Son, you left 4 words on a motorcycle. You started all of this. Your courage is bigger than any engine." Then he looked at Rochelle. "Ma'am, the Iron Brotherhood doesn't forget. Your daughter is now our daughter. Whatever she needs, for as long as she needs it, we ride." The hallway erupted in quiet cheers from the nurses who had gathered. But Maya's hematologist, a woman named Dr. Okonkwo, pulled Rochelle aside as the bikers celebrated. Her face was serious. The money was a miracle, she said. It removed the barrier that would have killed Maya's chances outright. But severe aplastic anemia requires more than cash. It requires a perfectly matched bone marrow donor, and the National Registry had been searched for weeks without a single match. Without a donor, Maya's body would reject any transplant. The money could open the door, but the key to her survival wasn't in that satchel. It was somewhere out there in the marrow of a stranger who might not even know they carried it. That night, Bones gathered his inner circle in the hospital conference room. He laid Dr. Okonkwo's printout on the table, the statistics, the timeline, the urgency. "We solved the money," he said. "Now we solve the match. Every brother, every sister, every associate gets tested. We bring in the whole damn club, and we don't stop until we find one." What followed was the largest bone marrow registration drive ever organized by a motorcycle club. The Iron Brotherhood converted clubhouses into testing centers, parking lots into swab stations, and every ride into a rolling billboard for the National Bone Marrow Registry. Bikers who'd spent decades being patted down by suspicious cops now stood in hospital lobbies, cheerfully rolling up their sleeves while nurses dabbed the insides of their cheeks. Reaper, the enforcer with a face that could clear a bar, learned to explain HLA matching in plain English to any prospect who flinched. Tank built a mobile unit on a flatbed trailer, a makeshift clinic with refrigeration for the swab kits, and towed it across 4 counties. Within 5 days, every member of the Arizona chapter had been tested. Within 10, chapters in 6 states had run drives at gas stations, diners, and a Walmart parking lot where the manager initially threatened to call security until he saw the sign that read, "Save a 6-year-old girl you've never met." The total number of new registrants, 2,800. Not a single one matched Maya's markers. The reality of severe aplastic anemia is that it's not just rare, it's specific. The immune system's rejection cascade depends on proteins called human leukocyte antigens, and Maya's had to match a donor's at 10 different points with near-perfect precision. The doctor had told Rochelle that the odds of finding an unrelated donor were less than 1 in 20,000. 20,000. That meant 20,000 people would need to be tested just to have a statistical shot. The Iron Brotherhood had pulled in nearly 3,000 in less than 2 weeks, a staggering number for an organization of its size. But it wasn't enough. Maya's platelet counts kept dropping. She needed transfusions every other day, and the longer the delay, the higher the risk of her body becoming too weak to survive the transplant itself. Then the story broke wide. A local news station in Phoenix ran a segment on the 900-bike convoy, framing it as angels on chrome. The clip showed Vinny lifting Marcus onto his shoulders so the boy could see the sea of motorcycles, and the image crashed through the internet's cynicism. By the following Monday, the video had been viewed 12 million times. Good Morning America called. CNN sent a crew to the hospital parking lot, still sticky from the residue of 900 exhaust pipes. Dr. Okonkwo gave an interview explaining the donor crisis, and within hours, the National Marrow Registry's website crashed from traffic. Volunteers reported a 45-minute wait to register online. Swab kits flew out of distribution centers. The Iron Brotherhood's phone lines, never designed for public relations, were overwhelmed with offers of help. Churches, schools, and corporate offices ran their own drives under the banner Maya's Match. One tech company in Silicon Valley paid employees a half-day bonus to get tested. The number of potential donors spiked past 50,000 in a single week. And still, no match. Bones sat in the hospital chapel, a room he hadn't entered since his mother's funeral, and did something he rarely did. He prayed. Then he called a man named Eid Kowalski. Eid was 71 years old, a retired sheriff's deputy from Yuma County who, 20 years earlier, had personally shut down the Iron Brotherhood's annual charity toy run on a noise violation. He'd called the club a public nuisance and arrested 3 members for disorderly conduct. Bones still remembered the smug look on Eid's face as he handed out the citations. They'd been enemies ever since, but Kowalski had registered as a potential donor back when his own grandson was sick a decade ago. And when the national database flagged his name on a Sunday afternoon as Maya's only perfect 10 out of 10 match in the entire country, Bones didn't hesitate. He dialed. "Kowalski, it's Bones. I need you to save a little girl. And before you hang up, I need you to know she's not one of ours by blood. She's just a kid who needs your marrow. I'm asking you to be a hero for the granddaughter of a woman we never met." There was a long silence. Then Eid Kowalski's voice cracked. "You and me got history, Santino. Bad history. But that don't matter now. Where do I sign?" The answer arrived at the hospital 48 hours later in the form of a FedEx package containing Eid's signed consent and a handwritten letter to Maya. He wrote that he'd spent years believing the worst about men on motorcycles, but seeing them mobilize for a little girl had changed something in him. "I can't undo the past," the letter read, "but I can give you my marrow, and with it maybe a piece of a better man than I was." Rochelle read it aloud to Maya, who was too weak to lift her head, and her daughter smiled for the first time in weeks. The transplant surgery was scheduled for May 3rd, the first available slot, and the countdown clock began. But the clock, as always, had one more cruel twist. The day before the procedure, Maya spiked a fever of 104 degrees, and the doctors realized that Eid's flight from Yuma, the harvest procedure, and the transplant window had collided with an invisible enemy. Maya's immune system was attacking the new match before it even arrived. The surgery was suspended. Dr. Okonkwo told Rochelle that they now needed even more, not just a donor, but a way to calm Maya's body enough to accept the gift. That meant a course of immunosuppressive therapy so potent it would leave her vulnerable to any infection. The risk had just doubled, and the one man who could still turn the tide was a retired deputy with a checkered past, now packing his living room in Yuma, holding his phone, waiting for the call that might never come. Dr. Okonkwo didn't give up. She ordered 5 days of aggressive plasmapheresis, filtering Maya's blood of the antibodies that were rejecting help before it arrived. Every hour, the pediatric ICU team watched the numbers inch back into safe territory. Meanwhile, Bones sent a single text to Eid Kowalski. "She's fighting. Stand ready." Eid didn't stand ready. He drove. At 71 years old, the retired deputy got into his pickup truck and crossed the desert from Yuma to Phoenix in the middle of the night. He arrived at the hospital at 3 in the morning, unshaven, eyes red, a man who'd once arrested 3 bikers for disturbing the peace now standing in a waiting room full of them, and nobody flinched. Vinny handed him a cup of coffee. "They're prepping her now. You're still sure?" Eid looked at the man he'd once called a public menace. "I've waited 20 years to do something right by this club, I'm sure." The harvest procedure took 4 hours. Eid lay on a surgical table while a needle drew the liquid marrow from the back of his pelvis, a painful, selfless act for a man who'd never met the little girl he was saving. In the next room, Maya's body was being chemically stripped of its immune system to make room for the stranger's cells. Dr. Okonkwo's hands, steady as a watchmaker's, guided the transplant process. When the bag of Eat's marrow hung on the IV pole and began its slow drip into Maya's veins, the charge nurse, a woman who'd seen every kind of hospital miracle over 30 years, stepped into the hallway and wept quietly. Rochelle, Marcus, and a dozen Iron Brotherhood members stood in a windowless corridor, arms locked like a chain, and waited. Day 3 post-transplant, no rejection. Day 7, Maya's white blood cell count registered its first uptick since the diagnosis. Day 10, the bone marrow biopsy showed engraftment. Each cells had set up shop in Maya's bones and begun producing blood. Dr. Okonkwo delivered the news personally. "Mrs. Chambers, your daughter is in remission. She will need monitoring for life, but the leukemia-like condition is cured. She has a new immune system. She has a future." Rochelle collapsed against Vinny, who held her upright like a brother. Marcus let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and bolted to his sister's room, where Maya, pale but alert, was sitting up for the first time in weeks, holding a stuffed crow that Bones had delivered the day before. "Marcus, did you see the motorcycles?" she whispered. "They roared for me." Eid Kowalski didn't leave until he'd met Maya. He walked into her room with his ball cap in his hands, shoulders hunched, and said, "Sweetheart, I'm the one who gave you my marrow. I hope you like it." Maya, who hadn't spoken in complete sentences for a month, said, "Mister, now you're part of my blood. That means you're family." Eid sat down hard in the visitor chair and cried harder than he had since his own wife passed. Vinny watched from the doorway and didn't say a word. That night, the Iron Brotherhood voted to make Eid Kowalski an honorary lifetime member, the first retired cop ever to carry the patch. Recovery stretched into weeks, then months. Maya's hair grew back soft and curly. She started first grade on time, and Marcus walked her to the bus stop every morning. The same boy who'd once placed a note on a stranger's bike, now the most confident 9-year-old in the school district. Rochelle took the $180,000 that had been raised and did something that surprised everyone. After paying the last of the hospital bills, she put the remaining $40,000 into a trust for other families facing pediatric blood disorders, administered jointly by the Iron Brotherhood and Phoenix Children's Hospital. "This money was given out of love," she said. "It needs to keep giving." The bikers didn't ride away. They became a permanent presence in the Chambers family's life. On Maya's 10th birthday, the entire Arizona chapter rolled up to their apartment complex with a bubble-blowing machine, a custom-painted bicycle with training wheels, and a new lease. Bones had quietly negotiated with the landlord to move the family into a 2-bedroom unit, and the club guaranteed the difference in rent for the next 5 years. Marcus received a small leather vest, child-sized, with his name embroidered on the front. Below it, a rocker patch read, "Founder." And here's the final surprising detail, the thing nobody saw coming. 2 years after the story went viral, Marcus, now 11, stood before the Iron Brotherhood's National Council and presented a proposal inspired by his own note. He called it the Marcus Project. It was a hotline, a dedicated phone number staffed by volunteers, printed on stickers that children could hand to anyone in authority, connecting sick kids whose families couldn't afford treatment with the network of donors and bikers who could. The club voted unanimously to fund it. Today, that hotline has answered over 10,000 calls, and 462 children have received life-saving medical care because a 9-year-old boy wrote 4 words on a piece of notebook paper and slipped it under a windshield wiper. Last month, a truck driver in Ohio found a note on his rig. "My brother needs a kidney." He didn't hesitate. He called the number. And somewhere in that moment, an 11-year-old boy in Arizona smiled, knowing exactly what was about to happen. The note on that truck didn't ask for money. It didn't demand a solution. It just said, "My brother needs a kidney," and a stranger picked up the phone. Same as a 9-year-old boy at a bus stop, same as a road captain holding a damp piece of notebook paper. The chain reaction started with a child who refused to accept that hope had a price tag, a child who believed with everything in him that someone would care. And 900 people, clad in leather and roaring steel, proved him right. The Iron Brotherhood could have ridden past. Eid Kowalski could have hung up the phone. Rochelle could have crumbled. But none of them did because at some point someone looked past the surface and saw the human need underneath. That's the truth this whole story circles back to. We never know whose life is balancing on a single moment of compassion. The bikers didn't know Maya. Eid didn't know the club. Marcus didn't know Vinny. Yet here we are, years later, with a hotline that saved over 400 children. So the question I'm left with, and the one I'll leave you with, is this. What note is sitting on your windshield right now that you haven't read? What door is waiting for you to be the one that opens? If this story hit you the way it hit me, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that help sometimes sounds like a motorcycle engine. And until next time, keep your eyes open. Somebody's still knocking.